Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar session today. It is 11 o'clock, so we will get started promptly in respect of your time. As you may know, this is the second installment of our four-part series, and if you missed the one last week, we will be repeating all four installments 2 more times with sessions each Friday throughout the months of July, August, and September. My name is Rebecca Kuhn. I am a business analyst with Workflow Concepts, and we will be your host today along with Cisco. A little bit about Workflow Concepts. We're a team of call center professionals with experience in designing, staffing, and managing and operating call centers for over 20 years. We work with customers to enhance their UCCX investment to improve the customer journey and maximize the utilization of UCCX. We're a pretty unique team that knows what it's like to be in the trenches of the contact center world. So we want to share some of our expertise with you today. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Brittany Erskine, who is another business analyst with Workflow Concepts, and she will be our presenter for today's session. So sit back, relax. I just want you all to note we will be recording this session. We already are. We will provide the collateral at the end of the session out to Cisco to distribute. Your phones will be muted. We ask that you keep them muted in respect of everybody's time and ability to hear the presentation. And don't forget to chat me with all of your questions. Take it away, Brittany.
All right. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So this week, as mentioned, this is the second part in our 4-part webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about CUIC reporting system details. So before we talk a little bit more about that, I'm going to go over just a quick recap of what we talked about last week. Just for those of you who were not able to make it last week, we just want to refresh your memory for those of you who have and make sure that we're all starting off on the right foot. And before I get into that, I just wanted to make a quick note. At the end of our information that we're going over today, we will be doing a quick high-level feature comparison between CUIC 12 and 11.6. We are going to do a deep dive today with the CUIC 11.6 version, as a large number of our customers and users out there have not yet made the leap to 12. So we are going to be working in 11.6 today, just as a quick note there. So if you do plan on dropping off early, make sure to follow along after with those 11.6 to 12 feature comparison, because there's some pretty exciting stuff in that. So back to the recap. So architecture, last week we talked about CUIC architecture and mainly focusing on the fact that CUIC is driven by the UCCX architecture. UCCX being the communications platform that allows for the distribution of CSQs, CSQ calls or ACD calls to skilled resources. We mentioned that there are different levels of reporting based on this architecture, those being really the system level reports, application, CSQ, and agent-based reports, so the different levels. Specific fields within those reports have different definitions and understandings based on that, based on the scripting. We talked a little bit about scripting and defined it really as the Cisco coding language that allows for inbound calls to route in different various ways to our agents, and understanding that really drives the data that we're looking at. So if you did not, per Rebecca's intro, see that architecture, I highly recommend taking a look at it, because it gives you a really good base understanding of how to view your own environment data. So with that, we are going to start with a quick navigation of CUIC, a quick little demo. We are going to have a guest star, Jay Keith, today, who's going to talk a little bit more about security and permissions within CUIC, because as we go through each of the different elements within CUIC, reports and dashboards and pretty much everything is really permission and user role based. So he's gonna give us a little bit more insight into that. And then we're going to talk about what the permissions allow, right? Everything from dashboards, reports. We're going to cover users and configuration with the security piece here. We are going to wrap up today's call with how to create and edit new reports in CUIC, and that just to be way more specific with that, is we're creating new and editing based on stock reports. So this would not entail writing new definitions for these reports and then importing them. We're not going to go over that. However, I am going to show you all how to create new and edit based on the stock reports that are available out of the box with CUIC 11.6. So that being said, what we're going to do here is I am going to pull over my 11.6 lab, and I'm going to walk through a few things. First off, right when I sign in, I can see what my user role is, because in the top right-hand corner, I have my login information. This is where I would go to sign out. The home screen is as such, right? It's a beautiful picture here of a mountain in the 11.6 version. We also have online help down here. If you click on this, it will bring you up a pop-up, and that does have a treasure trove of information that Cisco has provided. Everything from dashboards, reports, users, the real definitions, how to use it, overviews. So if you are looking for some light reading, I would recommend going to the online help. We have dashboards. We'll talk about dashboards in a few minutes in a little bit more depth. But ultimately what a dashboard is, it's the collection of widgets. Widgets can be reports, they can be URLs, they can be sticky notes. There's an option for custom widgets, which again, there's more information in the Cisco documentation on those custom widgets that you can add in there. But a dashboard, really the purpose of it, just to speak high level, is to present that overall view that either a contact center manager, supervisor, even at the executive level, we can provide dashboards to, just that quick high-level view of what's going on in the call center, whether it has a little bit of the live data in there or the historical. You have a true view in one screen, right, as opposed to clicking through a various number of reports to get the full picture. A dashboard would allow you to create your own view of multiple reports, and really that's customizable to whatever it is that you need to see. And we'll be talking about that, like I said, in more detail in a few minutes. Reports, we'll be going over reports as well, talking about some of the features that you have within the reports for the 11.6 version. There's some, one of my favorite tools are in there, and that's the favorite, so we'll mention that and show you where to get that. Users and configuration, these are going to pop up legacy CUIC interface. In order to get to users, for example, it's going to bring up, and I'll click on it here for us today, it brings up, like I said, the legacy version here, and Jay is going to be talking a little bit more about this. This is where he comes into play as I move into the next slide when I go back to the presentation. But what this is going to do is it's really going to allow an administrator to go in and edit user lists, user groups, but again, I'm going to let him speak more to that. I just wanted to show you that if you click on it here within this beautiful new architecture that CUIC has for 11.6, it will bring you and is expected treatment to pop up the legacy view. And again, that's if your user role allows it. You may be logging on and not even see users in configuration. And again, that's based on your role. Configuration is very similar. Data sources, value lists, scheduler, that's all in configuration. And again, it would pop up the legacy view here for us and allow us to get to the scheduler from 11.6 that way. I don't want to spend too much time on this, though, because we are going to go into some of these key features and a little bit more data. But what I'm going to do here, let's go back to the presentation. And, oh, there we go. Want to talk a little bit more moving forward to the next step on who can use this application as a whole, right? Security and permissions. Reports are ultimately accessed, right? Reports, dashboards, views within dashboards and reports, they're all accessed across all levels. So agents have their real-time data that comes from CUIC, for example. They have a certain level of permission that, speaking to that specific example. Supervisors have a certain view and they have certain rights and reports that they can see. Administrators have one, and super admin, which you can see that I have here, is a login as well. Each one has different abilities associated with their different level of credentials, and different reports are available based on their own permissions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jay Keith, and he can really speak more to specific user configuration here when it comes to what I was just talking about, user lists, groups, permissions. So Jay, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Excellent. Thank you. So what we're looking at here, again, you can see that the interface has popped up if you get into that user base. So you click user, it pops up the interface that shows you 3 sets where you can go in and configure. You have your user list, your user groups, and your user permissions. If you look to the right of the links there, you can see that the user list says add, edit, or remove a user. Right on down the line, a user group or user permissions. So depending on what you're attempting to do here in CUIC, again, everything is based on your role. And if you noticed when Brittany was in the home screen, the top right, her user said super admin. That's very important. Generally, you have a CCX admin user that you would use to configure everything in the Contact Center Express platform. And then you come over to the reporting, and you could use that user to log in as well and see some things. However, there is a super admin, which is tied more to the OS platform access. So generally, if you're in there configuring backup, disaster recovery, or you're doing OS upgrades, the user that you generally use for those 2 applications would normally, and we would generally see it as the super admin for Intelligence Center. And the reason there is a super admin is that would be global administrative access to the entire suite of reporting, security, and dashboard configuration features that CUIC has. So this slide is really just a quick look at what is available for you to select once you get into the user configuration. If you could just go to the next slide, please, Brittany. Once you click into that security tab on the far left, you can see it's highlighted green. You see those same titles that we saw on the last screen, user list, user groups, permissions. The next sort of column, Brittany, if you go just over to the second column there that says data sources, there's a drop down with the data sources. We have 2 screenshots here kind of meshed together. We did this so that we could show you the drop down for one side as well as for the other. So looking at the data sources drop down, we would be setting permissions for the data sources. And then on the right-hand side of the screenshot, you can see that we've moved to do permissions for the reports. So generally speaking, on the right-hand side, if you're looking to maybe one of your users doesn't have access to reporting, obviously in CCX, you can set the permission levels. You're either going to be an agent, a supervisor, and you could also have admin rights as well as reporting rights. So that is set in UCCX, which would then come with its own set of visibility within the CUIC platform. If you create a report or you create any type of dashboard, you do need to define who would be able to see that report. And generally, this is where you would come in, you would create your report, and then if you had to assign permissions so that people could see it. And when I say see it, I'm speaking of that the screen that Brittany was kind of showing you with all the folders. You could define a folder and then go and use this application here to assign who would have rights to that folder in order to run those reports. So notice that, next slide, yes, thank you so much. So generally speaking, we're looking at reports. So we're working on permissions for reports. We have one report that is highlighted. And then on the right-hand side, we can see that that report there, we're looking at the permissions. On the right-hand side, we have highlighted administrators up there. And if you look to the right, you can see that we've kind of selected set permissions, and that pops up the little screen there that says set permissions, allows us to click execute or write. Below that set permissions button on the left, you can see who has the permissions to run and write the report. So this particular report, all of the administrators can access it, as well as all of the users. So this is going to be important if you we see service calls all the time where someone says, hey, I created this report, but no one can see it. Generally, this is where you'd have to come after you create a dashboard or report just to confirm that the user that you are creating it for can, in fact, see it. There's also a run as feature. I'm not sure if Brittany's going to cover that at all, but a run as feature allows the administrator, the super admin, to run CUIC as the user of their choice. And that's used to generally confirm that the user you're trying to create a report for or a dashboard for can in fact log in and then see that report. So it's very helpful in that regard. This is a very robust feature-driven application, and setting permissions for groups and users, it can go far and wide in the configuration. And I don't think we would probably need another 3 hours to cover just how all of this works. But at a high level, if you do need to set permissions for visibility to any of the reports, this is generally what you would need to have access to in order to do that. Brittany? All
right. Thank you so much, Jay. Again, I will just remind you that you can ask questions to the moderator via the chat room. We will have time at the end to address those to the group as well. That way, for those super robust questions that you have, we'll be presenting those to the group as well. Thank you so much, Jay. Next, we're going to talk about reports specifically, right? And I want to build off of what Jay said. There's a lot of really strong information, and it's user-based. All actions on the report interface are based on user role and the user's object permissions for the reports and for folders. So by object permissions, we're really stressing that whether they have the role for inbound versus outbound. As you can see here in this and on these screenshots, what I've included is some folder structure screenshots. And again, based on your role, you may or may not see all of these or maybe some of these folders. And those are really, do you have permission via your role to view these objects? And what Jay just went over is really how you would get into the details on editing and making sure. But out of the box, your role should give you what you need. It really becomes more important when you start creating more of those customized reports or when you're creating dashboards. I will stress that out of the box, you should be able to see everything pertaining to your role. And it's really when your environment dictates that you need a little bit of more, right? If you need a little bit more visibility, as a supervisor, we don't want to necessarily change your role as a supervisor to an admin because that has, as Jay said, that's set in UCCX admin, not just CUIC. So that's where if you wanted to see more reports as a supervisor without necessarily upgrading your status to an admin per se, that's where you can make sure that you have those abilities. So just kind of relating that back to a use case for you guys. That's an example of where you might or when you might, other than creating the customized one. So as many of you may have noticed in 11.6 as you're working with it, or even 12 if you're on it, these reports, and they always really have been folder-based. You can navigate through them, of course, by clicking on the folder itself and navigating back. I'm not sure if many of you have tried, as much as I have, to click the back button in the browser because this is a browser-based application. It will not take you back to the previous report or the previous folder. The navigation is going to be where my highlighted laser pointer is here, is you would click on these hyperlinks to go backwards in the folder structure. And then, of course, you would click on the folder itself to move forward in that folder structure. So talking more about that at length, we talked in our last session that there are many different levels of reporting, and the main focus for those in the call center management or supervisor space can be found in inbound under historical. So again, that is reports, stock, historical, inbound. And again, like I said before, you may or may not see multi-channel, outbound, or system depending on your role, or you might see all of them. So talking a little bit more about that, for those in that role, right, call center management, supervisor, if that's the case and you're getting to inbound, you have to click through quite a few folders to get to where you need. Cisco's done a really good job at creating a shortcut for us, and a lot of people you may or may not know about it if you've been working in this solution for a while. With this latest version, you have favorites, which is, I previously mentioned it briefly. It's, ironic. The favorites is my favorite feature here, and that's corny, I know, but you can click on the little star next to your preferred report. So if you have 3 or 5 reports that you run on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and you don't want to click through reports, stock, UCCX historical, and then inbound, what you can do is a quick shortcut is you can go ahead and favorite some of these reports, so that if you click on favorites when you first log in, you're going to be able to see those that you have starred. One of the questions I get a lot is, okay, well, what if I favorite this report, but my colleague really doesn't need that and they don't want to see that? This is based on your login. So if I log in as Brittany and I favorite 3 reports, Jay can then go and log in and favorite his own 3 reports, so that when I log in, I will see mine, Jay will log in, and he will see his, which is very important because, of course, when we talk about CUIC and the level of data that we have, again, it's permissions-based. You're going to see the data that you have access to see, but as an admin, and I'm talking from the admin perspective, I have the ability in my user role to see everything. Which, when we come down to it, if I just want to see a few different things, it's really important to know that you can pare down what you see. And there is a lot that you can do with this solution to make it more customized to you. And that hasn't always been the case. Now, though, with the 11.6 and even in the 12 version, it becomes easier and easier to do it. That's a feature that's available to you. So with that being said, I do want to talk about a couple other features we have here. We have the ellipsis. Okay, so the ellipsis button, of course, when you see it on your Cisco phone or you see it in really anything, right, even on a smartphone today, ellipsis, it means more. You have more options. So if I'm clicking on a stock report and I click on this ellipsis, it's going to give me the ability, again, depending on user role and permissions, to save as. And we're going to go through that step by step in a few minutes here. It will have other options. They will be grayed out. Even if you have the super admin login, you cannot edit a stock report. You have to save as, which ultimately is a good thing because it prevents anyone from logging in and making critical changes to a stock report that can't be undone. So that's a good safety feature that we have there. So just to know that you will see, and it is expected to see, that you have drop-down information. You will only have, a couple of different options there. And again, it's depending on your user role. If everything is grayed out when you click on that ellipsis, it means that you don't have the appropriate permissions at the moment. So the other thing that I wanted to mention before I click on the next is that when you click on a report, it will pop up a tab. And when I say pop up, it maintains the same browser. And I'll just go through right here and show you, right? It's a quick screenshot. We have the reports, and then it clicked open a tab for that report. You can have up to 10 tabs open at once. So if you are going through and you're pulling a multitude of different reports and you just kind of wanted to see them, you can have 10 open at the same time. And that is for those of you who would use that. If not, you can definitely maintain one. And again, to navigate, do not hit the back button on your browser. You can simply click back to reports by clicking on the tab itself. And then to reopen the contact service queue activity report here, I would just click on the tab header here. So this slide here is really to talk about the anatomy of a report that we're pulling. and what the toolbar and what the tools available within a report are for us. So I'll start at the left here. There is a drop-down. You have the ability to create one report or have one report, and out of the box, there are many different views. So one report can have a chart view. The other one will have two different chart views. So views are how we view the data that we have filtered in here. So by the parameters that we're putting in, we have different views. If you click on the drop down here on several of the different reports, if you have had the ability to kind of explore this a little bit, you'll see that you do have charts and graphs. Those are editable up to a certain point. It does have certain limitations, so if you are interested, I would say spend a little bit of time and get used to editing those and what is allowed and what isn't allowed with that. But just know that you can edit the different views. And again, depending on your permissions, that caveat. To the right is thresholds only. We're going to walk through exactly where you would edit a threshold. An example of that would be call duration. If I wanted to see a line of call records here where the call duration was greater than 2 minutes, I can set that to have a different text field fill in that cell, or I can have it show red, which is a little bit more common, or yellow if it's 2 minutes, or red if it's 5 minutes. So you can set different thresholds. When pulling these reports, and this is actually available on live data as well, you can click on the only thresholds toggle button here, and what that's going to do is it's going to filter out everything that is not meeting those thresholds. So really to show the records or the line items that are shown for that. Okay. There is a drop down here available. This is where you would go to export a report. You have a pause for live data. You have a filter, refresh. So if you have this sitting up here and you logged in at noon and now it's 1 o'clock and you want to see, right, there's, like we talked about last time, different reports, especially historical, refresh their data at certain rates. So if you have this sitting up and it's been 30 minutes or it's been an hour and you want to see what the updates are since you first pulled the report, and you have it open, you can click the refresh button. This here, it's a circle. It's kind of hard to see on this screenshot here, but what I've done is I've kind of blown up the option that comes up is it's a pop-up. So that button is a little circle with an eye. What that is that's filter information. So filter information really shows you, okay, at a quick glance, if I have, use case, right? If I have 4 different reports open and I can't remember what the first report is, what the parameters are, did I look at that for midnight to midnight, or did I look at that from 9 to 10? So I can click on the filter information button, and without having to go back through the original filter and back out of the report itself, I can just show myself here what it is that I chose to see without again having to back out of that report. One of my favorite pieces, again, another favorite, I have lots of favorites about CUIC here, but my second favorite is the help button. The little circle with the question mark here available on stock reports here is, it gives you a pop-up. So if you're having trouble see this, check your pop-up blocker. Have to say that for everything and with a pop-up these days. So contact service queue activity report. If I did not know the definition of this report and really what the purpose of this report is, Cisco does a really good job at telling you, right? Because we have a number of different reports, and one of the biggest things I get is, Brittany, I don't even know where to start. And that's okay. One of the things that, like I said, Cisco does a good job at is providing you with a description of, why did we write this report? What is this report for? So here you can see what the different, what the information is about this report. Why would I run this report? And then if you scroll down, it's going to give you more information about each field. So some of the reports, and as I talked about kind of relating it to last week, this would really give you the definition of what is DQ'd versus what is handled by other. If you want that definition, because you don't remember what we talked about last week, or I didn't define it clear enough, you can go to this report here and you can click on the question mark. And as you scroll down, it's going to give you the definitions. And this help is available in the 11.6 and the 12. And I do believe it's available in 10.6. I think I saw a question pop up there. So the help is a really good tool to be able to really learn these reports. I'm in these reports every day. I still use the help button. So it's a great tool to use, and it's something that you can absolutely use in any of the stock reports, like I said. Okay, so with that being said, the reports, again, there's different levels of reports based on your permissions. We talked about the different types of reports that you would run, specifically if you are a contact center manager or supervisor from that perspective. In the following series, we have 2 left in this series. Those will go more in depth into contact service queue, for example, those CSQ level reports, and then our final is more on the agent-based reports. So we will be going into more of these reports in further details. So for those of you looking and they're like, well, we didn't really go over the reports. Well, we have 2 more sessions to go. Trust me, we'll be able to answer some more detailed questions about those specific reports coming up. So next I want to talk about dashboards. I mentioned exactly what a dashboard is in the navigation of CUIC. Dashboards are something that have been around for a little while, so dashboards do exist in previous versions, not just 11.6. They are a little bit easier to create in the newer versions, but they exist at different levels as well. So again, as we move forward with the newer versions, it becomes easier and easier to create these views for yourself. Please note that you do have to have a dashboard designer role in order to create a dashboard. And to view dashboards that are created by others, please remember that Jay reminded you, you have to have view permissions for those dashboards. Dashboards live in folders. If they live in if they have a parent folder or a child folder, you have to ensure that people have the appropriate permissions for each of the folders that they live in. So this becomes important too when you're moving dashboards or when you're moving customized reports, because if you want to maintain levels of access, just make sure that you maintain level of access in the new folder that they live in as well. So CUIC allows for dashboards. Dashboards contain widgets, right? That's what we talked about. If you click on the dashboard button in your home screen, it will give you the option to add new. Okay, if you add new, you're going to have a pop-up where you enter in the name and a description. I highly recommend that you use a naming convention that makes sense for your organization and keep it very organized, because again, depending on permissions, you can see a multitude of different dashboards, or you can only see your own. Again, that's depending on it, but naming convention, clean data, we always want to see that. One of the other things here, once I click on the OK button, it's going to bring me up to my dashboard template, so to speak. What I'm going to do from there is, it's kind of hard to see. If you highlight your mouse over that form and that template, you'll see you have boxes, and in the boxes it says Add Widget. Okay, so if I click on Add Widget, it then comes up with a no pop-up that says Add Widget. The different widgets being Report View, Note, Web Page, Custom Widget. Again, I referenced some Cisco documentation for this, for the custom widgets. There are some really good details available on that for dashboards specifically in the 11.6 and the 12 release, so depending on what version you're in. So for this example here, I clicked on Report View. Okay, Report View, and I want to mention this is very important, is it would be very beneficial to select a customized report when running and adding reports here. And the reason is that if I am customizing a stock report, I can truly pare down some of these reports into a quick snapshot. And the reason I say that is because if you're going to add more than one report to your dashboard, you want to think about real estate when you're talking about dashboard design. If you don't need every field available in that report, then let's think about that, right? And just those are some tips and tricks from Dashboard Design 101. So just keep that in mind. and you can pare down the reports and pare them down to the absolutely simplest view that you need. And you can do that by customizing stock reports, which is one of the things after dashboards that we're going to talk about. The different views, you can select different views, whether they're custom views, stock views, like I said, and a title. Title is always good. What do you want this to show up as in your report? Is it going to be the title of the report, or is it going to say, this is, as a note, this is the data that you need to see for yesterday? Whatever that title might be, you type in your title and you hit save. Okay, so in this slide here, we have an example dashboard. Okay, I have data from yesterday. This is agent specific. Very agent specific is this dashboard. So I have agent summary for yesterday. How many of my agents were logged in? Again, please don't judge us on this data. It is from a lab environment. So here I have a specific view about yesterday. I have handle time, talk time, right? It's just a quick snapshot of what I need to see in order to manage my team. And then I also have log in, log out. Okay, how long were they logged in for? Here I have a threshold set. They were logged in more than an hour. They're doing a great job for yesterday. So again, it's a lab environment, but it just kind of shows you that you can have a couple of different views, right? This is a summary. This is a detail. These are both agent-based reports. You can have CSQ-based reports. You can have detail reports. It really is up to you on how you want to create those. Here's an example of a note. This is just a little sticky note here. I've put in, this is a sample note. This could be anything from, remember to fill the copier with paper on Tuesdays, or, keep in mind that, agent 1 was on vacation last week, so that if I'm looking at this data and I have an anomaly for agent 1, I have a reminder there as to why, right? It can really be used for a multitude of different reasons. If you want to use it at all, you don't have to. Here I have an example of a URL. I just put Bing right in here. This could be anything from an intranet to Bing. If you have a URL-based cheat sheet for any reason and you want it available in your demo, you can do that as well. There are limitations to the URL. That is documented and very well documented, I might add. So double check that if you're having issues creating that URL widget. So that is dashboards. Again, I just want to remind you that they are permissions based, and you do want to share these. You can share them with your team. Another quick note: historical. You can share this permalink out to somebody, and they do not have to authenticate in order to see the dashboard. What that means is that I can create a dashboard. This is my view. I can share a permalink with an agent of mine that maybe doesn't have permissions for these historical reports, but I can share the permalink with them and they can see it. So they may not necessarily be able to log in to CUIC and view this within their view of CUIC, but I can share the permalink with them and they should be able to see it there. Live data requires authentication. So if you do have a live data report in here and you share the permalink with somebody that doesn't have the proper credentials for it, they won't be able to see it. So they will need to have authentication at that point. So historical data is fine. Live data does require authentication. So live data is one that people have been kind of working with here. And the more I see my customers moving towards dashboard, that's really what they're trying to create more and more these days. So just a quick note on that if you're going through and experimenting with any of the live data in a dashboard. Okay, so I've mentioned several times that we can create and edit stock reports, and it being so so important for creating dashboards, for example, if you wanted to, or if you wanted to create a new report here and save it to your favorites, right, your shortcut. Even if you wanted to create a new and have it scheduled to be delivered, those are things that you can all do. Again, this is very permissions based. So keeping in mind that I have the correct permissions here to do this, if I go over to a stock report and I click on the ellipsis, I've kind of blown up the screenshot here, and I click on Save As, I can save this report as. It's going to come up with this screenshot here. Enter in your name, your new location, Okay, so again, I have it saving to a custom folder. Once I do that and I hit save, it's created the report. Now it's created the report based on the report that I clicked Save As to. If you were to go into the upper right-hand corner of maybe a list of reports and you said click New, it's going to ask you to define what report you're creating new based off of. And that would be, it would give you a drop down of the different reports that you have available to you based on your permissions. So you do have to define what report, right? So right now it's the agent detail report that I'm editing as a sample, and that is a stock report. So now that I've hit save, if I go over to my custom folder and I click on that report titled New Agent Detail Report, I'm going to see more options when I click on my ellipsis. And this is what I had mentioned earlier, whereas even though I have the highest level of permissions in my demo, I still don't have the ability to edit a stock report. Whereas if I create a new by clicking the Save As or hitting the New button, okay, it's going to allow me more options with my own report. I can edit, I can change the name and create a new one. I can move it. Okay, again, whenever you move a report and you want to share this report with other people, make sure that you're assigning the associate permissions. You can add help, you can delete the report, you can share it, you can permalink, right? You can share permalinks, whether it's authenticated or not. Again, live data, just as a quick note, needs to be authenticated. So just keep that in mind. So let's look at what it actually means to create a new report or edit a new report. The first thing that's going to show you is the basic information. So when viewing basic information, we want to see what's the name, what's the version, and what's the author. Okay, things like location and report definition are going to be grayed out. That's to be expected. We have already defined the location, and the report definition is the agent detail report definition. That's the stock definition. We cannot change that. And the definition, that doesn't mean, okay, I'm defining this and describing the report. It's going to be, that's the description, right? The definition is the actual combination of SQL queries and value lists and information that we're putting together to create this view. So that really is the definition. So if you're looking to change the description, that would be under description here. So once we hit the next button, right, we're going to see, do we want to manage views and thresholds? You don't have to do this, but this is where you would go to edit the different views. Again, I had mentioned earlier, you can edit the grid view, which is just a list of information, or you can edit the chart. If I click on Edit View and hit, and I click on the Edit View, it's going to bring up the Edit View pop-up, where it's going to give me a list of available fields versus the list or the available fields that are on the report already. So I can highlight the different fields, I can move them to the left, and I can move them to the right. I can also edit the display name, right? So if it is agent ID, and let's say that agent ID means nothing to me, but really I want this to be the Windows login. This is defined as the Windows login. And again, it's specific to your environment. You can change it to say Windows login. Duration. If you have a different definition within your organization for the duration of a call, this is what Cisco calls it. You can edit the name. You can edit the font. You can edit the size. You can even change the order. So if you wanted called number to be the first one you see, you can change the order as well. By clicking on Save, it's going to bring you to the next, let me go back. By clicking on Save here, it's going to go back to your Manage Views and Thresholds. By clicking Next after that, you can actually manage your thresholds. This is where I talked about that example of duration of the call. If it's greater than 2 minutes, right, I have equal to here, but if it's greater than 2 minutes, we can set it to show red. Okay, and if I click Done and then the next, I'm going to view the default filter. Okay, if you take anything from editing of a stock report, I would show you and recommend that you take note of don't show filter when executing a report. My laser pointer is pointing to that right now. And this is critical, right? If you have a dashboard and you want to open your dashboard, let's say that you don't hit this button. what you're going to see when you open that dashboard is your reports will have the filter showing. And being that we don't want to see the filter, we want to set this as our default filter and just run the report. We want to click on Don't Show Filter when executing. So when you click on that dashboard, it's going to automatically execute the filter that you have set. Or when you click on the report itself and you have, say that you have a list of 5 agents out of a team of 50 and you only want to look at those 5, but you don't want to pull those 5 every single time that you're running a report. This is a good example of where you just save this default filter. This is part of creating that new. You don't even have to edit the report itself. Creating this view or creating this new report and saving a default filter alone without editing any of the fields is going to give you an advantage and cut down on time, because you can save your filter. You don't have to go through and search for everyone from A to Z that you have in your environment. You can save that default filter. And by clicking on the Don't Show, if you click on that report, it's just going to automatically run. It's not going to bring you to the filter. You can get the filter back if you want to change it just by clicking on the filter button in the report itself once you've run it. Really quickly, as I promised to mention, just really quickly before we get to questions, and then we can definitely go over any questions you might have, the feature comparison from CUIC 11 to 12. Overall, the biggest change is a refreshed look and feel. One of the biggest pieces of that specifically, if you look over here on the left, is 11.6. Over here is 12. You'll see that the circles and the drawers here that we have changed a little bit. Value lists, configure, and schedules. If you click on any of these in the 12 version, it's not going to bring you to legacy CUIC anymore. It will not bring you to another web page. It's going to maintain the same web page that you have open, and it's all in the 12 version. So just to bring that over and show you what that looks like, I will pull this over really quickly because I know I'm running tight on time here. Really quickly, this is my 12 version. If I click on my configure and I click on permissions, it's going to pull me into a view that's within this same interface. It's not going to do any pop-ups anymore. The other major change is scheduling. I would say let's see a show of hands, but we're on a webinar. One of the largest things that we all know, and one of the things that we've run into in the past if we've used this tool, whether we've used it in the first version of CUIC to 11.6, is you can't run anything larger than 8,000 records. One of the things that Cisco's done a really good job at and trying to remedy that is they've given us the ability to schedule a large report. So if I click New and I click on Schedule a Large Report, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to schedule as a system configuration administrator, right? So again, it's permission-based, to create a large schedule for a report with over 8,000 rows. So that is absolutely critical. One caveat with that is that you can have one at a time. So I can't create maybe 4 large schedules to run at the same time. It's one. You can configure one at a time. Other than that, really the look and feel lies in the changes lie in the look and feel, with the addition of no longer having that legacy view and having that ability to run one large report and having that scheduled to run after hours, so that there is no impact to any production environment that you might have. With that, I am going to give the floor back over to Rebecca. She's going to go through the list of questions from the chat, and Jay, Rebecca, and I will do our very best to answer anything that you might have.
Thank you, Brittany. Great job. I have really only one question, and I think you actually answered it, but we'll go back over it and let Jay or you answer it. So for the security permissions, does a user need to have permissions to a folder if they have permission to execute or write to a report within that folder?
Yes. So if you have rights and permissions to a report that lies within a folder, you still need permissions to that folder in order to view it. And Jay, please keep me honest with that, but it's at the top level. So you would need the folder permissions first and then the report permission.
Jay?
I think you're on mute, Jay. Okay.
Yeah,
that is how it is. It's documented in Cisco, and a good example of that is the dashboard, a dashboard or report, right? If you move that report from one folder to another, they make a special note that you have to make sure that the permissions are carried over within the folder itself, because it would prevent someone, if I removed a report that you were viewing yesterday, and I moved it into a new folder today, a note that they have there within Cisco documentation is to actually make sure that you carry over the permissions allowed within the folder structure itself.
Great. Got a couple more questions here from Jim. Are there any materials to help my users with the transition from CUIC 10.5 to 11.6?
There is, I would recommend the 11.6 user release. And when you say users, I'm not sure if you're talking about the supervisor level or the admin level. There's a lot of really good information in it, and typically what they do with that new user release is they'll call out specific changes. But it really depends on what your users are doing today and what they will be doing in the quote-unquote tomorrow environment. But that user release, the 11.6 user release, I think has a lot of really good information. That's off the top of my head, that's the best that I can, but we can definitely follow up on if there's any other material out there.
Thank you, Brittany. This is another question from Y. Does 12 allow scheduled reports to be displayed on the dashboard?
I don't know the best way of answering that. And I don't know if you could maybe go off mute for a second. Are you talking about the large report or the just a regular scheduled, under 8,000 limit record report?
Any report, she's saying.
Any report. I don't know that you would necessarily use or that there would be a benefit to a scheduled report, because you have, when you're creating a dashboard, you're setting the default filter anyway, and whenever you click on that report, if you have that don't show filter executed button that I showed at the end, if you open up your dashboard, it's just going to pull the report. Where the scheduled report really comes into to being more beneficial for the user is when you have maybe a single report or a multitude of different reports that you would use on a daily, weekly, or like on a regular basis, that you need to extrapolate certain pieces of information from. I would have that either scheduled for midnight to be in my inbox on Monday morning, or if it's something that I need to see every morning, I'd have that run on a daily basis. But when it comes to a dashboard, the dashboard is really available to you at all times, so to speak. Not in real time because it's not necessarily live data unless you have a live data in there. But I would suggest more. I don't think it would be very helpful to have a scheduled report in there.
Y clarified, there's no email integration. If reports are weekly, monthly basis to managers with no email integration under scheduling. If there's not an email address that we can send those reports to, you do have the ability to save them to a remote location within Cisco, and that's what I would suggest. Other than that, I don't think that the dashboard would be exactly what you're looking for. But you could use the dashboard, but I just wouldn't have it scheduled. You would set the reports that you want to see, and you would set their default filters and save them that way.
That way you have them available when they need to see them.
This one is from Colleen Reed. Can reports be scheduled and emailed to users daily, weekly, etc.?
Yes. Unequivocally, yes. Yes, they can.
Great. And I don't see any other questions out in the chat room. So with that, if you have any additional questions, this is how you can reach us for follow-up, info@workflowconcepts.com. And we encourage you to just reach out with anything. We're here to help you. And just as a reminder, next week we're going to be talking about Q reports. And the following and final week we'll be talking about agent reporting. This series does start over again on Friday, August the 9th. And we do have the recordings. I just got a question from Colleen about the session from last week. We do have that session recorded. I did provide that to Cisco. I am looking to them to reach out and provide those sessions out for everybody. So I will follow up with them again and just make sure that we've got that out for everybody. In fact, I think we have one of our Cisco reps on the phone, so I'll reach out to him directly. We just want to get that out to you guys as a whole, and we've also got the presentation from last week you can review as well. So with that, if there's no other questions, I want to thank everybody for your valuable time. We know your time is incredibly important, and you have very busy schedules, but we appreciate you joining us. We look forward to talking to you again next week, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.